Hello and welcome to Mr. C History. Now, London streets are adorned with all sorts of furniture, from benches to lampposts to my favourite statues, but also, of course, to clocks and clock towers, and that's what I'm going to look at today. I'm going around to find 7 of my favourite clocks that have a sort of historical connection or something quirky and interesting about them. Now I'm starting here outside Little Ben, as it's known, because at the end there of Victoria Street, of course, is Big Ben, and it sort of looks a bit like Big Ben, a little bit maybe. More on that in a moment. A key question here is, why are there so many clocks? Well, the key thing here with Little Ben is where it is near Victoria Station, just through there, because this was erected in 1892 at a time when pocket watches and wristwatches, etc., were, you know, the preserve of the rich. You didn't really have it, so people needed to tell the time. Specifically, they needed to tell the time for when their train was. But of course, the 1890s, more and more people are coming into London, and the trains are going out to the suburbs, so it's busier places. So how do people tell the time? Well, you put clocks all over the place, which is why, especially in the City of London, there are big clocks that adorn churches and big buildings through thoroughfares, etc. So people, when they're running through, they know the time. This is why there are so many clocks all over the place. Well, what's the story here with Little Ben? Well, it only really gets that name because, as I say, it's at the end of Victoria Street, where the other end of it is Parliament Square, where Big Ben is, because it doesn't really look like it, and there's no bell in there, which is exactly what Big Ben is, not the clock itself. What's also interesting about this, so I say it was put up in 1891 for people to tell the time, but it went missing for quite a while. In 1964, this was removed for roadworks, and it didn't appear again until 1981. Everybody thought it must have gone, but it did reappear again in 1981, and interestingly, it reappeared with a new plaque to say this was a Little Ben to commemorate the Anglo-French relationship. I don't quite know, and for that mind, it is permanently set on daylight saving time, British summertime, all the same time as Paris. So when you come here in the winter, it tells the wrong time. 1980, I think, was a time when I think it was inaugurated about the same time they announced that the Channel Tunnel was going to be built. So this sort of Anglo-French friendship was really developing. But it is interesting on this busy thoroughfare, but on to the next one. In the shadow of St Paul's Cathedral is an Art Deco building known as Bracken House, the home of the Financial Times, and yes, that does have an interesting clock. Most people are actually walking past it and not noticing it, and if they do, they might say, oh, that's an interesting zodiac sign. But then if you look more closely at the face that is staring out of you from the clock, it is the unmistakable face of Winston Churchill. He is there out of a sunbeam staring out. The key question here is why? Well, the answer lies in the name of the house, Bracken, named after Brendan Bracken, who was on the board and sort of chairman of the Financial Times, but crucially during the Second World War, Brendan Bracken was Minister of Information. He's, you know, the person sending out the propaganda or controlling the radios, the dig for victory posters, etc. It was him. And because he worked for so long with Winston Churchill, he was a great admirer, and so he decided to put him on his new building. What's the symbology of it? I think it's meant to be he's now one of the signs of the zodiac, therefore enduring or timeless or something like that. But here he is, he stares down us, and most people are not noticing at all. Behind me is the world famous Fortn Mason, the purveyors and shop of great, delectable, wonderful foodstuff. It was formed in 1707, this place, and they have a lovely Italianate Rococo style clock above it. It was founded by Mr. Fortn and Mr. Mason, of course, who were actually footmen at Buckingham Palace, and they got hold of things at the palace, all above board, I think, things like candles and stuff, and sold them in their shop. So with this long history, I'm sure you're expecting me to say that this is a grand old clock. Well, sadly, it is not. This actually clock only dates back to 1964. It was put in this position. Beforehand, they had lots of displays in the bottom here, and they wanted a sort of permanent display, and indeed every 15 minutes 2 men come out, they sort of bow to each other, and some bells go off, significant bells, because the bells that are in that clock were made at the Whitechapel Bell Foundry, the very same place where the bells of Big Ben were made, and the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia. So this is a slightly fake clock. It's very nice, but it's not very old. This is Piccadilly Circus underground station, and very, very busy. You might walk past and might miss this map of the world, but actually it's a clock. It's called the World Time Today, and it's also a moving clock because it has along here all the times, various different parts of the world. We are in London and it is just after 1 o'clock here, but of course over in the middle of the Pacific it is midnight. This, you'd have to stand there for a long time to see, but it is actually moving. It's moving at the rotation of the Earth. Now the Earth is rotating at about 1,000 miles an hour. This isn't that, but obviously that's relative to outer space. What interesting, this station was designed in 1928 and this was installed in 1928. It survived its whole time here. And it actually has an interesting message. Charles Holden, the great designer of so many tube stations, the message he was trying to bring with all this is that Britain is the centre of the world. It's meant to be that people travelling through Piccadilly Circus might suddenly need to know the time in La Plata, Argentina, or they need to know the time in Cape Town, or they need to know the time in Japan because they are busy, worldly people. The world comes here to London, comes through busy Piccadilly Circus. Everybody needs to know the time in their country, and here you'll find it. It's amazing it's survived this whole time. It's a brilliant, brilliant clock. This, of course, is Horse Guards Parade, just off a very noisy and protest-filled Whitehall there. But I'm here mainly for the bit that's often overlooked by everybody, the clock, or the clock face that's at the top there. This, of course, has famously got the bit where it would be 2 o'clock is blacked out. There's a black mark. Confusingly, it says 10. That's because it's a hour face, so it's after 10 minutes, as it were. But that would be 2 o'clock. That is to symbolise the execution of Charles I, which took place literally just across the road at Banqueting House there. I've made a video on that before. But on the 30th of January 1649, apparently at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Charles I had his head cut off. And the myth goes that somebody climbed up and marked that point. How much of that is actually true? Well, yeah, I think so. We don't actually know if specifically it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon Charles was killed. All we have on the record says early afternoon. I suppose that 2 o'clock counts for that. We don't think it is true that somebody did that immediately. It looks as if maybe that wasn't actually a Victorian thing, somebody up and put that black mark. But it does still symbolise, it does still memorialise what it's meant to be, the death of Charles I. Anyway, another secret clock. Now, no nation on earth is more synonymous with clocks and timekeeping and precision than, of course, Switzerland. And Switzerland and the Swiss are represented here in the centre of London with the clock that's behind me. Just off the very unpleasant and busy Leicester Square, this is a glockenspiel with a clock on top and some bells. It was put here in 1985 because where M&M World now is used to be the Swiss Centre, which is no more, place for the Swiss Tourist Board. But no more, but this still remains. And actually it was put here in 1985 to celebrate the 400th anniversary of the alliance between England and Switzerland, how it had held. In reality, this wasn't too hard to hold this alliance because Switzerland is a famously neutral. It's quite easy to have an alliance with a neutral country. Similarly, Switzerland's landlocked and Britain was always, for many years, worried about the sea. So quite, it's not too much of a celebration really, this alliance, but still it is here today. Now there's a bit of confusion as to how many bells there are. So when it was originally put in, it had 23 bells to represent the 23 cantons that existed in Switzerland in 1985. But since then, they've increased it more to 26. But the notice on there, and if you count them, says there's 27. Why? Well, the Principality of Liechtenstein has decided to get one in there as well. So it's got 27 bells, which apparently bong every so often, but not all the time. My final choice is not just a clock, it's an entire clock tower, this huge Metropolitan Cattle Market clock tower in Islington, just off the Caledonian Road. It was built in 1855 as a clock tower to the Metropolitan Cattle Market. What was that? Well, that was huge. It was a 30-acre site here for livestock. Pigs, chickens, cows, you name it, would come down off, from the north of England on the railway line going off to King's Cross. There was a railway siding in here, and this is where all the trading would come out. There was space for tens of thousands of all these animals. It was a huge, huge site. All of these farmers and buyers, etc., they needed to tell the time. So why do they do that? How do they do that? They look up at this huge clock tower here. That's why it is so big, and it surveys the land. Now, it was closed in the 1930s because technology made it easier for livestock to remain in position, but And most of the other bits of the site, this 30-acre site, was sold off for flats and roads and stuff like that. But the clock tower remains. It went into a bit of disrepair, but recently it's had a sort of zhuzh up, and you can occasionally go in there, I think, on an open house weekend. But it's really quite forgotten, or maybe the better word is overlooked, I think, because it's way up here a bit in North London and in this park now. I think people don't really recognise it, but it is huge, and it's really, really impressive as one of those London clock towers. But anyway, I think this is a good place for me to end. I've had an amazing time. I really enjoy all of these different clocks I've looked at. Very, very different ones, from huge ones like this to small, forgotten ones, to artistic ones, to quite old ones, to ones with historical meaning, to really quite modern ones as well. Please let me know, as always, what you think. And crucially, tell me if I've forgotten any. I'm sure there's loads of clocks out there that are quite interesting to look at. Please don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.